Welcome to Just Jocelyn. We're so glad that you could join us. Happy New Year to everybody. This is going to be a glorious year. I don't know about you, but I'm super excited. We don't have a lot of snow. We've had a little bit. I'm so glad it's down south and Midwest. It's their turn to see what we go through. Although I do have to giggle when Washington, D.C., you know, the foreign territory that claims to be our capital, shuts down and, it's 6 inches of snow. I don't know if anybody saw President Carter's funeral procession, but I think I saw one pile of snow on the right. And I'm really not kidding. So the streets were very, very wet. I'm sure they had the heaters out and made it so that, you know, that wonderful gentleman could have his funeral procession. But I really do have to giggle about how upset they were on the huge, massive snowstorm. And I'm like, I'm so glad they have to deal with it. But that done and said, welcome back. And I am super happy to have Miss Laurie Ortolano. You know, this woman, she never sleeps. She doesn't sleep. And she goes happily skipping down the sidewalk and checking on this and checking on that. And next thing she knows, you get an entire heaping lawsuit that just jumps on you, grabs on and goes, pick me.
Right.
So welcome. Happy New Year. I'm so glad to have you back.
Same to you.
So let's jump in with, you know, you've been telling me about municipal trust funds, and I'm sitting going, municipal trust funds. So I'll be the dummy in the show and ask the questions. I have no problem doing that because everybody needs to learn. What is a trust fund, and why would a city or a town have a trust fund? I thought you had that for your family to protect your property that you're going to pass on to your loved ones.
Well, municipalities and towns have the opportunity to accept money donated by the public for specific purposes that are outside money allocated through either a warrant article or a vote of your councilman to spend as part of the general fund. So, for example, high schools may say, I want to set up a trust fund in honor of a student who died.
Okay.
And everyone can make donations into this fund for this student who died.
Okay.
And each trust fund has their own resolution, language formulated by the city that specifies how the money can be spent.
So what its exact purposes.
Its exact purposes. Some of these trust funds have dedicated boards of trustees who manage the fund, and other trust funds are just designated by a city resolution for a very specific purpose, where private money, and I'm not going to say private, it's public money coming in for a very specific cause that is set up. Very often there's scholarship funds. They have scholarship funds set up as trust funds where you can make a donation for a student scholarship. We have, they just formed a trust fund for the new dog park that opened in Nashua. So, and there's a board that actually runs that, and they wanted to earmark money, donations that come in to assist with the maintenance of that dog park. And one of the trust funds we have that formed in 2023 is a capital reserve fund. So there's different types of trust funds. There's just funds called trust funds. And then there's capital reserve funds that also fall under the umbrella. And they're usually used for specific purposes to do like maintenance on a building, or purchase something, replace equipment, or purchase something. That's a capital reserve fund. So the Art Center in the city formed a capital reserve fund in August of 2023. And it was fed with money from the private company that is running the Art Center, Spectacle Live. They produce a check every quarter, every 3 months. They cut a check that's based on a percentage of the ticket sales, the merchandise, food, drink, sales, and any donations, private donations that come in. And they distribute that to the city on a quarterly basis. And the goal was that that money would go into the Capital Reserve Fund, accumulate. So the resolution, the little, the guiding regulations set up by the city called out a state law. They had to comply with a state law for trust funds, which is RSA chapter 34.
Okay.
And they had to they had to, they had specific purposes. They had to go through, the Board of Trustees for the Art Center would tell the city when it needed money to do maintenance. And the account would be its own dedicated account. It would be non-lapsing, which would mean when every year the budget rolls over and it's zeroed out. We empty out our books on June 30th.
Okay.
Our budget zeroes out, and we start with a new budget.
Right.
Accumulated by taxes and grants and all kinds of things. These trust funds typically don't zero out. The money stays in them because you're growing it.
And it rolls over.
It rolls over.
It rolls over.
So
okay.
it's a revolving, it's a non-lapsing fund. It wouldn't zero out in June, and it would earn interest. Usually your goal with these trust funds is to invest them.
Well, I would think so.
Right.
I mean,
you
really.
You want to invest them, and you have the right to invest them in stocks and bonds and mutual funds and higher yielding interest accounts or regular interest accounts. So you have choices. So what happened was in October of this year, well, actually, I'll go back just another step. In August, there was a citizen, who came to several Board of Aldermen meetings, frustrated with the city's compliance on the right to know law. He was interested in knowing how the city invests its fund money. What does it invest in? And of course, that's a good question, and it's a public's right to know. So we asked for the investment prospectus, essentially.
Let me guess. It was either redacted 99.99%, or he's still on chasing it and getting the runaround.
He was chasing it and getting the runaround.
Okay.
What they gave him was pension fund information from the Department of Public Works.
I
we have a
don't believe
pension.
he asked for that, even I know
He
that.
really didn't. Actually, his right to know was very well written, and it said, I'm looking for the investment funds and the prospectuses for the trust fund investments similar to what you have for DPW, because that was publicly available. So what did they do? They sent the individual the DPW information on investment. And he wrote back and said, geez, I think I was pretty clear. I don't need the DPW. I have that. I would like your investment information on who you're investing in. What companies are you investing in with this city? They came back and gave him like 2 pages. They took the city financial report, which gave the total of the money invested in these trust funds, just a little line item, 4 number lines, and gave him that. And he said, well, that doesn't meet the requirement either. That doesn't tell me how it's invested.
Correct.
I don't know who you're investing in.
Well, who's investing, who's guiding, and where it's actually, like, did you put it in Apple? Did you put it in NVIDIA?
Right.
Did you put it in
Adobe? Is
anything?
it in,
so just for people,
AT&T, who has it, right?
What have you invested in? How did you invest in it?
Right. And it would also give you an idea on how actively the city is managing their investments.
Right.
So,
or did they just park it in,
There was a lot of parking going on. So, no shifting either. Not a lot of movement. So, a series of more emails went back and forth. And then, and the Right to Know administrator set up a meeting and said, oh, I'll have a meeting with you. Very interesting, because the Right to Know administrator has never been willing to have a meeting with me. But he set up a meeting with this gentleman, and the gentleman thought, you know what? I'm going to get all my information. Got there, and they had 3 pieces of paper. He thought he'd get hundreds, right?
3.
And so he walked out of that meeting and came back. Three times he showed up at the board meeting with, this right to know situation is not going well for me.
Right.
And, there's a lot of ridiculousness happening here and waste.
Let me ask you a question. I'm not sure if it's really pertinent, but it just popped into my head. How many trust funds are there in Nashua?
Well, according to the last MS9, 143. A lot.
I don't know why that just popped into my head, but 143.
Valuing $64 million.
So are you hearing this, Nashua? There's 143 trust funds for a total of 64 million, blah, 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 million with an M, dollars. And a public person asked for, what is that money being invested in?
Couldn't get an answer.
And he can't get an answer. And it has to be invested, and it has to be managed.
Has real strict rules on the management.
So how do 3 little pieces of paper cover $64 million and 143? And I didn't graduate college with a, degree in
finance
in this, and I can
you know.
question that.
Right.
I mean, that's just like basic.
It is very basic.
Finance 101.
It was very basic, and the individual was very articulate and very, a lot of times I think people send information into the city, and I've had the chance to review some of the responses that have come out of our administrator's office, and they're disappointing. They fall very short. I feel a lot of people get the runaround, but what a lot of people do is they walk away, go, geez, they'll write back, geez, I didn't expect that. Or, really?
They don't have a next step.
They don't do a next step.
Yep.
Okay? There's only certain people that do the next step. And this individual did about 8 steps and finally came to the point where they released information to him. So, and I watched that whole thing unfold and I just thought it was so interesting. Well, and the mayor engaged with him in a public meeting. The mayor engaged with this individual, which is very unusual.
I was going to say,
usually
very
not
rarely.
helpful. And when the gentleman was saying, we obviously invest in some stocks and mutual funds, the mayor said, no, we don't invest in any. We don't. We're very conservative. We only stay in, interest-bearing accounts or CDs to be safe. He said, well, your annual report shows that you have at least $10 million in the stock market outside of DPW. It shows that you have investments. So I know what you're telling me is not true. So there was some challenge going on there.
Was there? I'm guessing there was more than a pregnant pause.
There was, and again, this individual was committed to try to get that information, and eventually, from that information dropped into his hands maybe the end of October.
Okay.
Started in August. So, okay, stuck with it a few months, back and forth. So in October, I happened to say to a friend, I wonder how much money's in that Capital Reserve Fund for the Art Center. They've been taking checks in since August. Be cool to see how much is in there. Where is it? So I go, I'm pretty good at finding the financial reports, and I go on. I can't find that fund. So I said, in 2024, it's not popping up. So I called my more shrewd financial friend who's done finance for like 45 years, and I said, I can't find this. I said, it should be on the books now. I mean, it wouldn't be in the audit because it was formed after the 23. It would be in 24's numbers.
Correct.
When they closed. But they're running month-to-month financials on it, set up. Money's got to be going somewhere. Plus, they're taking all these checks. And it said it had to be in a bank account. That's
correct.
Interest, that earns interest and is non-lapsing. So she goes and looks, and she says, something's very wrong here. I can't find it where I should find it. It's not in an asset account. I'm going to dig around. She digs around, and she says, I think they put it in the general fund, and they spent all the money. So she said, I'm just going to do a simple right to know. I'm going to ask for the bank statements from its inception in August of 2023 to now, which was October of 2024.
Okay.
Basically 1 year. I want all the bank statements on this fund. They make her wait like 8 days, not 10 days or so. They said they need more time. They come back and deliver no records on bank statements and no reason why. They deliver every check that was sent to the city, the 6 or so, for the quarters that the company Spectacle sent checks. So they give her that. And she writes back and says, well, that's not a lawful response. That's not what I asked for.
Right. You asked for the step that comes after that.
Right.
Those are the checks that the Art Center gives to the city
that you
to
then
go in
handle
a
them
trust fund that's supposed to be managed. Boy, watch out, people.
So
and they won't give her anything?
They gave her nothing. So she went back and said it again. Hey, that's not what I asked for. I want the bank statements. They come back, 5, 6, 7 days later with no bank statements again. This time they give her the same checks, the same 12 pieces of paper. And then they said, our trust accountant for the city keeps a detailed recording of the expenditures and credits, and debits and credits monthly. And they said, please see the attached report. And they gave one report for 1 month, August 31st of 2024. Okay, so first of all, there's a whole lot of compliance problems with that.
All right.
Because she wanted all the bank statements. If all you have is those reports, then you should have given them all. But the worst part was, it was redacted.
Didn't I say that at the beginning?
every account.
Redacted, you can't have. Redacted, you can't have. Redacted, we don't know where it is. Redacted, you can only have 2 pages. Redacted, you can't have it.
Right.
This
So
seems like a theme to me.
it's a theme, all right. And what they redacted, it's not like they redacted, bank statement account numbers. They redacted their own field numbers that they use to track public money. Those are all public.
Correct.
Those forms I actually found the form on the website through a tremendous amount of digging. It's all public. So I actually sent it back to the city just like 6-7 days ago and said, I don't think this is redactable information. Please look at it and unredact it. Now, I am concerned, and so is my friend, that the reason they redacted it is because at the time we asked, the account numbers set up do not show that the money was put where it was. They have the ability to backtrack.
Correct.
And
they
correct
into the proper trust fund.
And so I think they did that so that they can fix the numbers and then give him a new sheet that doesn't show the numbers of where the money was.
Right.
Okay? So it's a game of chess and beating them at their game. But it was wrong to redact, no question. And I'm waiting for that unredacted. But once again, she didn't get all the accounts. So then I started writing. I said, okay, let's bring up the resolution. It was R23-142. That's how the city formed it. Mm-hmm. And I said, let's see what the statute is. It's chapter 34. Let's bring up chapter 34. Well, chapter 34 says every board, every trustee group is to have cities and municipalities are required to have a board of trustees for city trust funds.
Yes.
Makes sense. Mm-hmm. So I went on.
At it right here.
Yeah, I went right on the website.
And in full disclosure, I'm terrible at research. I do it, but I'm terrible at it. So
when you can find it.
If I can find it, you can find it.
You can find it. So there. And then there's another chapter, section 3122, which is the powers and duties of towns. That's towns. There's a city one that's 34. And you're going to appoint, the city appoints 5 trustees. Okay? And it's a requirement of the state. It's an enforcement of the state. They're appointed by the mayor. The city charter says the mayor, the board president of the Board of Aldermen, the treasurer for the city, and 2 people appointed by the mayor serve on that board of trustees for the city. So immediately I go to the normal spot on the website to find
who are the names of the trustees.
Yeah. And where's this board? It's not there. There's no board there at all. So then I said, well, I'll use the search tools.
Well, it is. It's in his mind.
It's in his mind. Exactly. So I used the search tools and I said, I couldn't come up with any board of trustees for city trust funds. The last time I could find any notation of it was when Donna Lee Lozo was mayor in like 2014.
So are you saying that there has not been a board of trustees since Don Ches became mayor?
In 9 years, he never appointed a board. So in 9 years, they've never reviewed this money. And it really has not been managed.
Trust money.
No.
Trust money in general.
Right.
The 143
million. I mean, the
143 trust
counts,
funds.
Yeah, totaling 63 million. I imagine this year they put some money in that it's closer to 70 million or 72 million, maybe 75 million. I don't know. We've added to it. But the bottom line is there's no board of trustees to oversee the management and the investment of that money.
So we don't have a board to oversee it. We don't know who's managing it. We don't know where it was planted to grow.
No. So I went back when I saw Mr. Perrin, the Right to Know administrator, tell the citizen that the trustee accountant produces this detailed financial report monthly. He didn't give the name. He didn't give a link to a report, nothing. They're always very evasive. So I wrote back and said, this is what you said. I cut and pasted what he wrote to her. And I said, can you please tell me who this person is? Who's the accountant trustee? Mm-hmm. He comes back, 5 days later, according to the Right to Know law, which really is like 7 days because the weekend counts and the first day doesn't count. I wait all that time. Mm-hmm. And he comes back and says, a right to know, this is not a proper right to know request. You have not asked for the proper record. It was not reasonably described, and therefore we're not going to comply with providing you with a record. Well, it wasn't a right to know request. All I said is, what's the name of the person who's the trustee? It wasn't an information request because sometimes, Jocelyn, you don't need one.
No.
That's a common sense.
Just give me the name of it.
Right.
It's public knowledge. What are you hiding?
It's just so simple. Okay? So.
Sorry, I go very street talk and basic, so.
I really get it. So I wrote back. I went to a Board of Aldermen meeting and I took that right to know and I read it into the record. And I said, this is absurd. Mm-hmm. This is what's costing taxpayers so much money. It's a simple question. And I said, I really think we have to look at eliminating this right to know administrator. Because clearly, if you've been here 2 years and you don't know the difference between a question and a records request, then you need to not have that job. Mm-hmm. And we need to not fund that anymore because it's creating more liability than benefit. So I wrote back to Mr. Perrin, the right to know administrator, and I said, okay, it was a simple question. It was very straightforward. But now I'll give you a records request. So please provide me with the job description of the individual serving as the trust accountant for the city trust funds. And please provide me the last paycheck paid to that individual. Feel free to redact their address, but I want their name. So now I've given him a records request.
Yep.
So, 5 days later, he comes back and he says, oh, well, now we're going to answer your question. And he gives me the woman's name. This is the absurdity of what's going on in there. It's malicious. It's malicious.
But they're being totally transparent because you know why? They use the word transparency.
They say it. It's the optics that counts.
It is.
It's not the reality.
This is absolute insanity.
So I finally get the woman, and the right to know law says, hey, the books for these accounts are supposed to be open for public inspection. Mm-hmm. So I go to the finance office and I knock on the door. And another lady answers the door and I said, hey, I want to know if the trust accountant is here. She said, we can't talk to you. You need to write a right to know request. And she proceeded to close the door in my face. And as she's closing the door, I said, actually, the law permits me to inspect records because that's the right to know law. And if you have records and books on these accounts, I'm supposed to be able to see them.
Right.
She closed the door in my face, and that was the end of that. So I don't even know if the trust accountant was in there.
Wow.
So I wrote back to the city and said, hey, these are open records.
Yeah, there's no request needed. This is a walk in, knock on the door, let me see these books.
So what I tried to get in it, go ahead, you have a question.
No, I was just going to say this might be a really good point to take a quick break.
Sure. And
come back. So just to oversee, we've got 143 trust funds in Nashua, totaling at one point 64 approximately. 64 million with an M dollars. We don't know where the money is being invested, who's managing it. The one gentleman said there was 10 million of that was in the stock market, but we don't have any paperwork saying what stocks and again, who's managing it. So we've got a big question. Where is this money? What is it being used for? And if it was put into the general fund, why, how come, and how do we fix that?
And the problem with the general fund is specifically the Art Center money. That's the one we tied.
The big one. Okay.
The Capital Reserve Fund that got opened for the Art Center that we thought would have like 80K in it. Mm-hmm. It just wasn't showing up anywhere.
I gotcha.
And that was where it tripped a red flag for us.
Cool.
So when we come back, we'll talk about some state forms.
Absolutely. So thank you for joining us, and we will come back with Trust Funds and Right to Know Part 2.